When the president of Mexico makes a bold statement like Mexico is safer than the US, it's going to raise some eyebrows.
With shocking reports of gun violence and crime splashed across the news from Mexico to the US, which country is safer for Americans? The truth may surprise you.
And definitely stick around until the end of this video and we'll tell you where to find the safest neighborhoods, cities, and states in Mexico. Let's get started.
But isn't Mexico dangerous? That's usually the first question most Americans ask us when we tell them we live in Mexico. Our answer is you can't believe the mainstream news media, who are clearly biased. Fear-mongering makes for great ratings.
From our perspective, we feel much safer in Mexico than the US. But feelings are not facts, so let's take a look at some recent data. The data tells us that Mexico is in fact more dangerous than the US overall, but not for Americans. That's right. You have to look beyond the headlines if you want to understand how violent crime impacts Americans living or traveling in Mexico.
To back this up, the most recent crime statistics released by the World Bank show Mexico had 28 homicides per 100,000 people in 2021, while the US had just 7 per 100,000 people. In other words, Mexico's murder rate is exactly 4 times that of the US.
Now for the shocking reality for Americans. According to the U.S. State Department, only 75 U.S. citizens were murdered in Mexico in 2021. Say what? This stat really surprised us. Out of more than 21 million U.S. citizens traveling to Mexico, only 75 were murdered.
To put that in perspective, that's a homicide rate of less than 1 per 100,000. Just a fraction of the US national rate of 7 per 100,000. So why is the US State Department issuing do not travel advisories for Mexico? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us.
Next, let's take our Mexico versus USA analysis a step further and zero in on the state of Texas. Perhaps Texas is even more hypocritical than the US State Department. Texas had a murder rate of over 8 per 100,000 in 2021, almost 15% higher than the US national average.
Even with this track record, Texas decided to issue advisories for its citizens to avoid travel to Mexico right before this year's popular spring break travel season. But looking at the numbers, we disagree. In fact, we would advise Texans to travel to Mexico if they want to stay safe. Based on the data, it is statistically safer for Texans to travel to Cancun, Mexico for spring break, or any tourist destination in Mexico for that matter, than to stay in Texas. More than 8 times safer to be exact.
Again, the American news media consistently sensationalizes the murders of Americans in Mexico and portrays Mexico as an unsafe destination for Americans. But nothing could be further from the truth. Yes, there are occasional stories like the horrific kidnapping of the 4 Americans by gunmen in Mexico in a case of mistaken identity. But let's take a look at the insane volume of crime stories reported by CNN just this past weekend. 2 state troopers shot, 1 fatally, in a manhunt that included several shootouts in Pennsylvania, police say. 2 dead in campground mass shooting during music festival. Mayor, quote, shameful, unquote, to raise kids in country overrun by guns. At least 1 juvenile killed and 9 others injured in an overnight mass shooting in St. Louis. 1 dead, at least 22 hurt in a shooting at a Juneteenth celebration in Willowbrook, Illinois, police say. We're literally desensitized to mass shootings in the US at this point.
Returning to Mexico, we're not saying literally everywhere in Mexico is safer than the US. But just like in the US, there are some cities and states that are safer than others. And some neighborhoods are safer or more dangerous within those cities themselves. So let's talk about that for a minute. What are the safest neighborhoods, cities, and states in Mexico?
First up is Merida, Yucatan, which is consistently rated the safest city in Mexico. With one of the lowest crime rates in the country, it's not surprising then that Merida's home in the state of Yucatan is also ranked the safest state in Mexico. Yucatan's governor recently said that supporting the local police is key to the low crime rate, which is also boosting the population and investment in the region. San Francisco and other major U.S. cities suffering from high crime should take note. Even the U.S. State Department lists Yucatan as one of 2 Mexican states where they recommend exercising just normal precautions, the least restrictive on their current list of Mexico travel advisories.
When we were in Merida, we were surprised to walk down a side street near the city's main square and find hardware stores selling knives right on the street. The knives were displayed on wooden stands with prices noted, but the store clerk was inside the store, so you could literally just take one if you were a criminal. My first thought when seeing this was, wow, this city must be really safe if this isn't a problem. I can't imagine what would happen in San Francisco or Chicago if they had knives for sale on the street like this. In the US, you can't even get razor blades to shave in most major cities without asking someone to unlock those plastic barriers.
Speaking of Chicago, the last time we were visiting Chicago, we had a knife pulled right next to us. We were leaving the Apple store in Lincoln Park, one of the nicest neighborhoods in Chicago, and a guy on the L train pulled a knife on another guy as he was mad he was blocking the door at the end of the train car with his bike. A door you're not supposed to access unless it's an emergency, I might add. So that was scary. It's also the only crime we've witnessed in 2+ years traveling around Mexico. But it wasn't in Mexico, it was in the US.
Moving the discussion to expat and tourist popular Mexico City, or CDMX as it's known, one of our favorite cities in the world, let's talk about some of the safest neighborhoods. If you're coming to Mexico City, you're most likely going to be spending time in the upscale and trendy neighborhoods of Polanco, Roma Norte, or Condesa.
In Polanco, for example, if you sit down at any restaurant or sidewalk cafe, the waitstaff will immediately bring over a little stand for your purse or shopping bags so you don't have to put anything on the ground. We actually see this all over Mexico and love it. Your first thought may be how convenient it would be for thieves to take your valuables, but we never see it. What we do see are local ladies who lunch with their expensive handbags hanging on these stands, and they don't seem to have a care in the world because it's safe.
You'll also notice a visible police presence in Polanco. In particular, we love seeing the tourist police officers dressed smartly in their white polo shirts. They blend in, but you do notice them. To us, it just reconfirms the high priority the Mexican government places on keeping visitors safe.
And it's not just in Polanco, but we've noticed a visible police presence in most, if not all, major tourist destinations in Mexico. Even on the beaches from Tulum to Zipolite, you will find police on quads patrolling the beaches to make sure everyone is safe. Yes, it can be disconcerting for the first-time visitors, but some of our neighbors know these police officers and wave to them. They're super friendly and are here for your protection.
For some additional tips to stay safe in Mexico or wherever your travels take you, first, be aware of your surroundings and avoid walking alone at night. Second, don't flash any expensive jewelry or electronics. Your watch can be worth more than a year's wages to someone. Third, don't get into unlicensed taxis. And fourth, always respect the locals' customs and traditions. If you're interested in learning more about our travel tips to avoid scams and travel safely in Mexico, check out this video in the info card above. We'll also post it in the description along with some other videos we think you might like.
Well, that's it for this video on whether Mexico is safer than the US for Americans. What do you think? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, so don't be shy.
Also, if you found this video helpful, insightful, or entertaining, do us a favor and smash that like button for the almighty YouTube algorithm and consider subscribing to our channel.
For anyone new to our channel, we've made a number of videos about Mexico, from the 11 reasons why we moved to our experience with private healthcare. We also have video travel guides for the most popular and under-the-radar destinations in Mexico, so definitely check those out and subscribe for more.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next adventure.
Hasta luego!